Ever since Netflix decided to roll with Love Meghan Season 1, or as I like to call it, Season 1 Part 1, because that's what it is, and we know that they're ultimately calling Part 2 a Season 2. Ever since they decided to really put that show on Netflix, we know that it actually repulsed a lot of people out there. A lot of customers ran away from the platform. They decided to unsubscribe and move on to other platforms like HBO Max, Peacock, etc., etc. However, focusing on the whole Meghan Markle situation for the reshoots happening right now for Season 2, it is only getting worse. And we already know that Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters, they're already dealing with a lot of backlash as we speak. Now look, Greg Peters, you know, for what it's worth, he's been trying to defend Netflix. He's been trying to actually get Meghan Markle out of there for a very long time now. And just now, Ted Sarandos, in the midst of this most recent emergency meeting, is actually beginning to actually show a lot of signs of turning the tide. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, one thing about Meghan Markle is that, yes, we know, and I've pointed this out several times, that she's very, self-absorbed, inauthentic, narcissistic, and greedy, and she will always have those characteristics, and we've seen those characteristics play both in the public eye and, of course, what we've heard behind the scenes over at Netflix. Now, what's really interesting here has a lot more to do with what's going on with the whole investigation happening over at Netflix for her overall acts of plagiarism, and how this ultimately led to one of the worst, if not the worst, emergency call over at Netflix. So let's get into the overall details about all of this, because one thing is for certain is that this show is sinking like the Titanic at this point in time. Now, with of course the Meghan Markle backlash hitting a new level over at Netflix and various other studios after her pregnancy video went viral, one major development going on now involves more to do with her getting in more serious trouble at Netflix after her viral video post on Instagram spread across, of course, like wildfire, and she refuses to take it down. One crucial update to this entire situation now involves more to do with how Meghan Markle recently was involved in an emergency meeting after their investigation at Netflix discovered more acts of plagiarism from other popular television programs. Now, this is the moment where Ted Sarandos began to turn against Meghan Markle to a certain degree, where he recently agreed with Greg Peters and many executives, including members of the board, to cancel an entire episode of With Love Meghan Season 2 that was going to serve as an extra episode during reshoots. This would have bumped the actual show up to 9 episodes for Season 2 instead of 8, an idea that Meghan had created while she held creative power weeks ago before she lost it. It turns out this entire scene was recently scrapped by Ted Sarandos, and this was his call directly after their most recent emergency meeting. It turns out that the script for the episode that was to be filmed during reshoots involved extensive examples of plagiarism from more episodes of Pamela Anderson's Cooking with Love show. The copying of scenes in the actual script involved lines of dialogue and more that were said to be so severe that even Ted Sarandos was offended by Meghan Markle and her ego to rip off other people's work. Now, after their extensive investigation took place at Netflix and their emergency meeting involved Meghan Markle, this is where both Greg Peters and Ted Sarandos informed Markle herself that she is not getting the 9th episode after all for With Love Meghan Season 2. This created an uproar from Meghan Markle, where she created multiple defensive arguments, even with Ted Sarandos, during the emergency meeting that took place between the two CEOs and the board of directors, along with Meghan Markle involved as well. Now, this, of course, all actually led to a moment where it was said to be the worst emergency meeting yet for the board of directors over at Netflix in regards to Season 2, to the point that it led to a moment where Meghan Markle stormed out of the board meeting. Now, guys, let me just say one thing about this. Now, if there's any way to describe a moment that would display her as acting like a child, it's probably this scenario where Meghan Markle runs out of the board meeting because things just aren't going her way. Now, the fact that they had a surprise 9th episode in play, in the works, it was all written, it was in the script, but Meghan Markle actually wrote a large portion of that script because, in case you guys did not know, she did indeed held creative power, I would say around 5 to 6 weeks ago before she lost it. And they were going to use this scene during reshoots. They were going to bump it up to 9 episodes instead of 8 to kind of give you extra material to watch. And the fact that this episode was entirely dedicated to ripping off Pamela Anderson's Cooking with Love show without Netflix even noticing that weeks and weeks ago. I think it goes to show you that Netflix is very incompetent. They're not professional. They're very unorganized. They don't know what they're doing. And that's why you can't have Ted Sarandos as one of the CEOs alongside Greg Peters. I think that Greg Peters is a far superior CEO than Ted ever will be. That's just my take on things. But let's move forward. Now, of course, the executives and producers are in panic mode over the upcoming scenes that are to involve Meghan Markle for reshoots starting off for episode 2 and 5. Already the board is frantic over the performance of the With Love Meghan season 2, since a significant part of the reshoots will no longer use a script and will instead strictly focus on improvised material. This is where Meghan also began to argue with her agent and manager for not handling the situation well with Netflix properly, as she was demanding her team to negotiate with Netflix in hopes of changing their mind, and that worked to no avail. This then escalated to a point where Ted Sarandos is now calling 2 emergency calls for next week. Now look, we already know that Ted Sarandos, he loves these emergency meetings, he keeps using them, and in a very, big way that is really just not really necessary. It's creating a lot more issues over at Netflix. But we know one thing about Meghan Markle is that when she held creative power, she really created a lot of material, but not for Netflix, not for good. It was actually something that was ripped off by other creators. It was not original material, not original content for the show. She literally took ideas from Gordon Ramsay, Hot Ones, the other show that we talked about that she ripped off, Pamela Anderson's Cooking with Love, and even other reality TV shows in the mix. We talked about how she took lines of dialogue from the Kardashians and other shows like the Osbournes. It's just ridiculous. Now, look, we already know that there's a lot of personalities out there, like Meghan Markle. We have, those in Hollywood that act like a Rachel Zegler, or an Alec Baldwin, or a George Clooney, a Julia Roberts. They're all universally the same. They bring up the same exact talking points. That's exactly why they parrot each other, right? And I think that a lot of these studio heads, they're getting very tired of it, because they're beginning to realize that there's no business model here when you're focusing on an agenda, or when you're focusing on a show that features somebody that is universally rejected, right? That's exactly why people actually did not like her Instagram post, because of how cringe it was, her pregnancy video, and how it backfired, and how that literally just tanked her career. Whatever was left of her career, everything fell like dominoes, and we talked about this in the last post. But what's interesting about this is that, yet again, Ted Sarandos showing more and more signs that he is beginning to get more and more fed up with Meghan Markle. Now, will it hit to a point where he outright rejects a season 3, or outright rejects a contract renewal? We'll have to wait and see in the coming months. They're said to make an ultimate decision on that by late August, just before the fall arrives of 2025. Overall, I would like to hear what everyone has to say about Meghan Markle and the overall situation happening over at Netflix, and everything else in between when it comes down to the investigation and this emergency meeting taking place, and everything else involved with the executives and the producers. And overall, guys, if you enjoyed the content for today, I would love to hear what you have to say about all of that below in the comments, and I will catch you guys later.